This morning, with the midterms fast approaching, President Trump attempting to crack down on mail-in ballots.
I think this will help a lot with elections.
The president signing an executive order directing his administration to create a list of confirmed U.S. citizens eligible to vote in each state and to ban the Postal Service from sending ballots from voters not on that approved list. The order also says states that do not comply could lose federal funding. But the Constitution gives states, not the president or the federal government, the power to run elections. Election experts say the order is unconstitutional and not enforceable. Democrats labeling it illegal and a blatant unconstitutional abuse of power. Minority Leader Chuck Schumer saying bluntly, "See you in court. You will lose." Top election officials in Oregon and Arizona, states that rely heavily on mail-in voting, already vowing to sue.
I believe it's foolproof, and maybe it'll be tested, maybe it won't.
For months, the president has railed against mail-in voting, claiming without evidence that it leads to, quote, cheating. But cases of fraud involving mail-in ballots are extremely rare. And just last week, the president himself cast a ballot by mail, voting in a Florida special election, even though he was in town when early in-person voting was available.
You know what? Because I'm president of the United States.
The president has increasingly sought to sow distrust in the nation's elections ahead of the midterms. He recently called to nationalize elections, and the Justice Department is attempting to force at least 29 states to turn over voter data. All this as Trump remains fixated on his 2020 defeat, the administration investigating his false claims that he won the states of Georgia and Arizona in that race.
Hey everyone, Dr. John here. So what just happened right now? Trump signed an executive order targeting voting rights, prompting nearly 24 Democratic attorneys general and the ACLU to immediately file lawsuits, calling it the most dangerous election interference attempt yet. Here's what happened. Just days ago, Donald Trump issued a new executive order. And let's be honest, this came straight from his panic room inside the Oval Office.
And for weeks, the president has been pushing for Congress to pass the SAVE Act, which would impose new restrictions on voting in mail-in ballots. But, George, that bill has no clear path forward.
And Mary John mentioned it's the judges blocking the president's ballroom plans.
Yeah, George, a federal judge is putting the brakes on the president's $400 million ballroom here at the White House, declaring, quote, "The president of the United States is the steward of the White House for future generations of first families. He is not, however, the owner," and saying that construction has to stop here until Congress approves of the project. But, George, the president has already torn down the entire East Wing. The White House is now appealing the ruling. The president insists congressional approval isn't necessary because the project is privately funded. Now, the judge is also rejecting the administration's argument that stopping the project now poses a security risk, writing the existence of a large hole besides the White House is, of course, a problem of the president's own making. George.
Yeah, and there are a lot of questions about what's going on underneath that proposed ballroom. Mary Bruce, thanks very much.
The one he runs to whenever he realizes Congress isn't going to rubber stamp his voter suppression fantasies. He had been pushing the so-called SAVE Act, which would have forced Americans to produce citizenship papers just to vote. That bill crashed and burned in the Senate. So what does Trump do? He grabs a pen, bypasses Congress entirely, and invents a whole new scheme on the fly. And this scheme is a doozy.
The biggest problems we have with election integrity in this country are, one, inaccurate voter rolls that allow ineligible people to vote in various federal and state elections all over the country. And then secondarily, you've consistently identified that vote by mail in this country has become rife with fraud. People returning ballots who aren't eligible to return ballots, ballots being sent to people who aren't confirmed to be eligible voters. So what this executive order is going to do is, one, we're going to take federal data. We're going to ensure that each state's election officials are provided with a comprehensive view of who the eligible voters in their jurisdiction actually are, allowing them to properly verify that everybody voting in their elections is legally able to vote. And then it orders the Postmaster General, the U.S. Postal Service, to take bold new measures to verify that ballots both being sent to people are being sent to people who are eligible to vote, and then that ballots being returned are being properly returned by eligible voters only. And we believe that combined, the measures in this executive order will help secure elections in the future and ensure that the many abuses of our election system in the past aren't repeated in future elections.
Right. Howard?
So the fundamentals of our democracy are built on voter integrity. right? We all need it. You've said it time and time again. It's a total agreement amongst everybody. So here's the idea. The states, right, run these elections. They will, if they want to use the U.S. mail, the U.S. Postal Service, they're going to get a code, a barcode from the U.S. Postal Service, and they're going to put that on the envelope, and we will have one envelope per vote. None of this time where we have no idea, there's no observers to mail, there's no envelopes, there's no certainty. That's all going to go away, and what the president is doing today is he's going to make sure that mail-in ballots are safe, secure, and accurate, and will have a clear distinction. If you voted by mail, you will have it on the envelope. Obviously not on the ballot, but on the envelope. So we will know 1 million mail-in ballots. There'll be 1 million envelopes, and you'll be able to know exactly, correctly, that citizens voted.
The executive order creates a bizarre new regime that plants itself right between you and your ballot box. Who's running it? 3 federal entities: the Department of Homeland Security, the Social Security Administration, and the U.S. Postal Service. Yes, the same Postal Service that struggles to get your junk mail delivered on time is now supposedly in charge of deciding whether you get a mail-in ballot. The same Social Security system that has famously outdated records is now supposed to verify your citizenship in real time. And DHS, an agency already stretched thin, is supposed to magically build a master citizenship database from scratch. Let that sink in. There is no existing, accurate, real-time citizenship database in this country. Trump just ordered his team to create one overnight and then use it to block mail-in ballots. The natural question everyone is asking: how is this not a total violation of the Constitution? We're talking about the 10th Amendment, which reserves powers to the states. We're talking about Article 1, which gives states the authority to run federal elections. We're talking about separation of powers because Congress never authorized any of this. But since when has that stopped him? Now, I don't want anyone thinking this is just one lawsuit. This is actually a two-front legal war. A couple of days ago, the ACLU, representing voting rights groups, filed first in Massachusetts. They went in hard, seeking a temporary restraining order and other emergency relief. That case is built on constitutional and statutory grounds, arguing the executive order is an illegal power grab. But right on their heels, and for slightly different reasons, rooted in states' rights and federalism, came the Democratic attorneys general, and not just a few of them. We're talking about at least 20, if not all 24, Democratic AGs from across the country. They filed their own lawsuit in the same federal district court in Massachusetts. And who better to walk us through this than Virginia Attorney General Jay Jones? When we connected with Attorney General Jones, his message was sharp and immediate. He said they sued the administration to stop this executive order because anyone who has actually read the Constitution knows it's unlawful. He told me flatly that he believes the courts will agree when all is said and done. And here's why his voice matters so much. Virginia is a state that has already expanded voting access dramatically. They have 45 days of early voting. They accept mail ballots up to 3 days after Election Day. They have the Virginia Voting Rights Act, which Jones himself voted for as a legislator 6 years ago. And despite what Trump and his allies keep claiming, Virginia has no evidence of voter fraud. Jones's own predecessor went on a very public, very expensive wild goose chase to find fraud and got thrown out of court because there was zero evidence. So when Trump issues an order that would force Virginia to scrap its own election laws and instead rely on a half-baked federal database run by the Postal Service, you can understand why Jones used words like laughable and unlawful. He said this is nothing more than an attempt to sow confusion, stir up nonsense, and make things chaotic for the states. And he's right, because the timing is not accidental. Let's rewind just a little. 2 weeks before this executive order, the Supreme Court heard arguments on a different voting case, one involving mail-in ballot grace periods. You know the rule. A ballot that's mailed by Election Day, but arrives a few days later still counts. Many states, including red states, have that rule. But based on the questions from the conservative justices, it looks like at least 6 of them are ready to kill that grace period. Trump saw the writing on the wall. He saw the SAVE Act dying in the Senate. He knew he was losing on multiple fronts. So he did what he always does. He panicked and signed an executive order that he knew would get sued immediately. Why? Because chaos is the point. Confusion is the weapon. If voters don't know whether their mail ballot will count, maybe they just don't vote at all. And let's talk about the mechanics of this order, because it's even worse than it sounds. The executive order commands the Department of Homeland Security to partner with the Social Security Administration to double-check citizenship records. But those records are notoriously inaccurate. Social Security data wasn't designed for real-time voter verification. It has outdated information, missing information, and errors that would disenfranchise thousands of legitimate voters. Then the Postal Service gets dragged in to essentially act as a gatekeeper. They're supposed to verify that a voter is on some master citizenship list before delivering or returning ballots. So now an agency that can't reliably deliver Amazon packages is being handed the keys to American democracy. Attorney General Jones didn't mince words. He called it Orwellian. He said it should scare just about everybody in this country because the administration is trying to create a master list, and once you have a master list, you can use it for all sorts of scary purposes. He emphasized that the biggest responsibility of any public official is to keep people safe, and this order makes Americans less safe and less secure. Now, I have a theory about where this really came from. You might think this is pure Trump, but if you've been paying attention, you know there's another name that keeps popping up in every chaotic government overhaul: Elon Musk. He's been effectively let back into government operations. He was on a phone call with Pakistani officials about Iran policy. He's reportedly rewriting rules for the Securities and Exchange Commission. And when I hear about a massive new database project involving Social Security and DHS, I don't think of Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. I think of Elon Musk. This has Musk's fingerprints all over it. A grand tech bro solution to a problem that doesn't exist, implemented without any regard for the law or for the people who will be hurt by it. So how did the lawsuits unfold? The ACLU filed first in Massachusetts, then, almost immediately, the Democratic Attorneys General Coalition filed in the same district court. This is a common pattern. You see it with voting rights, with SNAP benefits, with immigration policy. Multiple groups race to the courthouse, and they often end up in the same friendly jurisdiction. Massachusetts being a favorite because the judges there tend to move quickly and rule based on the law. Attorney General Jones gave credit to Massachusetts AG Andrea Campbell for moving fast, and he said the rest of the coalition is putting their resources behind that case. Their hope is to get a temporary restraining order as soon as possible, because every day this executive order is out there, it's confusing voters. And that confusion is already happening. Virginia has an ongoing redistricting referendum. Voters are trying to figure out how to cast their ballots. The last thing they need is a federal government throwing a wrench into the system. Jones made a point to say that this executive order doesn't apply to the current redistricting vote. But that's exactly the kind of nuance that gets lost in the noise. Trump and his team know that. They're counting on it. Let me take a step back and give you some history, because this isn't just about one election or one executive order. The reason states control federal elections goes back to the founding of the country. The framers had a huge debate between big industrial states and smaller agrarian states. The southern states, including Virginia, had a very healthy skepticism of centralized power. They didn't trust the federal government to run their elections. So the compromise was clear: states run elections. Period. That's why Article 1 of the Constitution gives that power to the states. That's why the 10th Amendment reserves all powers not delegated to the federal government to the states. For generations, Republicans were the ones shouting about states' rights. Now suddenly they're silent. Now suddenly it's Democrats like Jay Jones saying, "Get the federal government out of our business." And here's the irony that Jones pointed out: Democrats have become the defenders of federalism. They are the ones saying, "We've administered federal elections for 250 years. We've done it just fine. We don't need the president meddling." Meanwhile, the party that claims to love the Constitution is completely mute when Trump tears it up. Now, I want to get personal for a moment, because this issue hits close to home for me. My wife won the green card lottery before I met her. She's naturalized. One of our first dates, I took her to Yankee Stadium, because that's what you do when you're in New York. During the Star-Spangled Banner, I looked over and she was crying. I asked her why, and she said it brought her back to her naturalization ceremony, the moment she was sworn in as an American citizen. She loves this country. There's no one more patriotic than my wife. And the idea that people like her are somehow voting illegally, that there's this massive conspiracy of voter fraud, is a lie built on a web of lies. Attorney General Jones said the same thing about his own family. He's the grandson of civil rights activists in Virginia who were denied the right to vote because of the color of their skin. He sits across the dinner table from family members who lived through that. So when he hears Trump talking about voter fraud, he hears the same old voter suppression tactics wrapped in new language, because that's what this is. Let me give you a magic decoder ring. Whenever you hear the phrase voter fraud, translate it in your head to voter suppression. There is no outcome determinative fraud in American elections. There never has been. Study after study, court case after court case, Republican-led investigations, all of them come up empty. But the lie persists because it's useful. It's a tool to justify laws and executive orders that make it harder for specific people to vote. Which people? The ones who tend to vote against the people pushing the fraud narrative. It's not complicated. Attorney General Jones put it bluntly. The biggest difference between the MAGA party and the Democrats is that Democrats aren't telling you who to vote for. They just want you to have the ability to vote. Republicans are scared of who you're going to vote for. And when you're scared of the voters, you don't try to win them over. You try to stop them from voting. So what happens next? The ACLU case is seeking a temporary injunction. The Democratic AGs are seeking the same. Both are in front of judges in Massachusetts. Attorney General Jones told me he expects it to move fast. Emergency nature, fast track. He said he might have gotten updates even while we were talking. The American people are waiting for an answer because every day this order stands, it sows distrust and confusion. And that's exactly what Trump wants. Jones also made a broader point about the political moment. He said that since Trump came back into power, every single election result has shown Democrats overperforming. He pointed to his own race in Virginia, where he ran against the most well-financed incumbent attorney general in history and won by 7 points. He said people are frustrated. They see the chaos. They see the tariffs that have cost every family an average of $1,700 over the last year. They see the constant lurching from one crisis to another. And they're ready for something different. His advice to Democrats running this year: be normal. Tell people what you believe. Show them you understand what they're going through. High grocery bills, expensive childcare, the cost of diapers, because those are the real issues. And when you have an administration that's obsessed with maintaining power through illicit means instead of solving those problems, the choice becomes very clear. Jones even predicted that the Senate is now in play. He said the administration is devolving, that there's nothing but chaos. He noted that Pam Bondi had been fired, another shakeup in an endless series of shakeups. And he said that voters are looking for steadiness, predictability, and a return to normalcy. He ended with a line that stuck with me. This is the acts of a small and defeated man who knows that his administration is loathed by the American people. Now let's circle back to the legal strategy. Why Massachusetts? Because it's a fast district, because there's a track record of success there on voting rights cases, and because the Democratic AGs have built a coalition that can move quickly. Jones gave credit to his colleagues in Massachusetts for picking up the pen and filing immediately, and he said the rest of the coalition is putting their assets behind that case. His hope is for a swift